Thanks a million, Aoife. How are you all doing? Good stuff. Listen, thanks for coming out on a Thursday, a Saturday. I'm 5 days ahead of myself or behind myself or something, right? Listen, just before we move on to what I'm doing today, is I'm doing a workshop here tomorrow in just a very hands-on, showing you how I record content and basically the tools that I use, how I go about it. So it's a good one for anyone interested in kind of collecting their own kind of local community-based material, or also even just family stuff, or even for any art, any kind of practitioners as well, arts heritage practitioners. So that's on tomorrow at 11 o'clock, Aoife, and there's still spaces available for that, right? So it's a very hands-on kind of session. But so what I'm going to chat with you today for an hour is I'm going to just chat to you about, I was delighted Aoife asked me to do this because I'm so used to doing fixed talks on certain calendar dates, and when I'm asked to do something in November, I kind of have to go, well, I've just missed Halloween and Christmas isn't here yet. So I thought to myself, well, November is the month to remember. A lot of people would use it for. And I said, right, I'm going to look at death and superstitions and customs and practices around that. So what I've done for you over the last week or so, I've basically got together and just pulled together content for you, just to show you. And by no means is this a kind of comprehensive overview of complete Irish funeral practices. You know, I could be here for 3 days with you just talking about any of the particular stuff. So it's really just to kind of whet your appetite and give you kind of an overview. But I also want you as well, when we're here as well, is just to feel free to chirp in as well, okay? So this is me yapping, this is me just talking, a talk and showing videos and chatting. But if you have something yourselves that you want to throw in, put your hand up, or does that make sense to you, right? So just fire ahead and do that, right? Because it's like this, we've all experienced probably death in some ways, especially as we're getting older, with family members and, you know, with close friends. So it's something that we all share and we all can connect with, right? So the first thing, even just before I even go, if in case you don't know, I've got a practice. So basically it's an arts practice, really. And for years, for the last 20 some years, I've been up and down the roads of Ireland recording, collecting and sharing content, which is basically, it's turned out, someone told me 10 years ago, it's folklore. To me, it was just kind of stories and ghost stories and yarns and things that people did. And I suppose I was making kind of documentaries on the lives of ordinary people. I grew up on the coast of Wexford, so that was a natural a drawback to me. But I'd work all over the country. And what I do was, collect, record and share. And that was before even social media came about. And producing content and just capturing content in as true as voice as you possibly can. And to me, I can only talk to you here now as a kind of conduit of the stories that people tell me. And literally before I came on here, just about half an hour ago, I was going through my phone and 3 people text me a string of funeral customs. So I literally transferred them over to the laptop as well. By the way, I'm not one of those people who prepares PowerPoint presentations. So if you're ever going to get me to do a talk, don't ask for a PowerPoint presentation a week in advance, because it will not happen, right? So basically you get me and, you know, things just happen in the moment, and that's grand. And I've stuff prepared that I might show and stuff prepared that I won't show. Do you know what I mean, don't you? So that's just the way, the nature of it. Now the old slides keep me on track a little bit, all right, but that was the practice for years, recording that kind of content. And the rock and roll lifestyle of village halls and daycare centres and film festivals and handball alleys, that was the life you were leading, right? And then social media came along, and my other half, Aileen, was on Facebook, and I went on it. No, actually I didn't. She said to me, so will you stop fecking looking at my page and get your own page? So I did it, and I started to share content, and straight away people could see material that they couldn't see on mainstream media, or even in social media. So I found a space for myself, right? And I found a new space to share work that people could access. So that's the tool, and the reach is real. Like, the reach is a couple of million people every 4 weeks on a page. Just me, depending on what humour I'm in, right? Now, that's enough of that. So we're here to talk about November. One of the things that's just passed is All Souls Day and All Saints Day. Now, whether you're a practicing Catholic or a non-Catholic like myself, we were raised as Catholics, but we're not part of the club anymore. But still, I'd have an awful lot of huge respect for the beliefs and the practices of the people. My own mothers and my own mother and my own grandmother and my father and all those, they had that. They were all that meant so much to them. But one thing that some of you will probably do yourselves, and I saw Granny doing it and Mammy doing it at home, was they'd always light a candle on All Souls Night. And sometimes they'd light a candle on Halloween night as well. So give or take those 3 days, there was kind of fluidity there. Halloween night, All Souls and All Saints Day, particularly All Souls. And one of the things that I loved about it, and I still like about it, it was very private. and it meant that people could do it in their own homes. So you didn't really have to go to the church to do it. And there's a lovely quiet way, and we don't know that as much. We don't see that as much now because it's so private. And that's what's really, really special about it to me. And people do it in so many different ways, and different ways people leave out food. A man from Laois called John Hayden was telling me that his father used to go to bed and leave out the table set and leave bottles of stout and cards and pipe tobacco, and they said they'd get up the next morning and they said it's almost like Santa had came, and they said that, oh God, Uncle John came back there last night, he was playing cards and Tom was smoking the pipe. So people do this stuff privately still. I know a lot of people all over the country, and even here in Wicklow, in the middle of Dublin City, I know some traveller women who will still set the table with sandwiches and bottles of stout and packs of fags for people that they believe will come back to visit them that night. So we keep our dead close to us in Ireland, and it's a thing that I firmly believe in. Other little things that people would do is you would leave out food on a Halloween night in particular. A woman was only telling me recently about leaving out food, like a piece of brack on Halloween night. A woman from Mayo, they would do that. Some people would, if you go through the archives, you'd see some people would leave out Call Cannon. Some of these probably made Call Cannon Halloween night. You'd leave out a bit of food for the dead to come back. So that time, we believed that the dead were walking around with us. One of the things that I grew up with at home, and again up and down the country, you'd come across this. Mammy at home had a great saying that you'd never throw out water on All Souls Night, because they believed the souls were walking around and they believed the dead were there. And if you threw the water out, she always said that the water will come back in your face, or you'd wet the souls. So you didn't do it. And here's me, I grew up as a child here on the coast of Wexford, and 20, 30 years later I'm up in Mayo and I'm hearing the exact same stories from Mayo. Now my mother had a little saying that said, hugga hugga teapot jack, she'd say. And it was a little warning. And when I was up in Mayo, God, in 2008, these people were telling me, he said, oh, we'd said hugga tishka salach. So it's a little warning, hugga, and then tishka salach was the Mayo version. But somewhere along the line, a bit of the Irish survived in Wexford, and then the teapot was they emptied the teapot out because you were throwing out the tail leaves at the end of the night before there was sinks and that kind of crack, right? So that was a really important thing, that the idea you wouldn't wet the souls. I'm going to play a little video that I recorded with Granny into 20 some years ago. And she's talking about what she did on All Souls Night. I'll let you have a listen.
Well, in my younger days, I don't know, they used to sweep up the floor, leave it nice and clean, and the chair there, and the towel, and then the base of water on, and the nice and the fire on, and that's all I know, and again, and you wouldn't be allowed to stir that candlestick from wherever they put it, and the light.
So that's all she had, but it was just enough to basically say, leave the fire light and leave the door open, leave a little basin of water, leave a towel for the souls to wash themselves. And they're the same stories we'll hear repeated. When you go looking, sometimes people say to me, I never heard that at all. You're making this stuff up. Then you go, right, here's the video, here, right? Because sometimes we believe, because we don't do it, we say, sometimes if we don't do something, we say, oh, sure, no one else is doing it. But you're wrong. People do things privately and quietly themselves. And that's one thing you always want to keep a check on with folklore and traditions. People say, oh, we did do this here, we didn't do that here. Does that make sense to you? I'd even see it in classrooms. You'd be asking a young lad, who posts their letter to Santa? And 95% of the hands go up. Then you go, who leaves their letter for Santa out in a boot outside the front door? And they're all looking around, laughing, going, no one does that. And next child will put up his hand and go, we do that, right? Or who puts it up the chimney? So we assume what other people do, but don't always assume what other people do. Do you know that kind of way? So if you take that from that. Now here's another thing for you, another little video for you. These are women in Mayo, and I just want to show you that, talking about what they remember on All Souls Night and the dead coming back. Sorry.
Souls Night, you didn't throw out tea or any liquids. You put them in a bucket or a basin at the end of the kitchen, and you left the back and the front door opened for the souls to come through, that there was welcome for them. And it was so important, like we really felt that our grannies and granddads were coming through.
Like on All Souls, like nobody went out of the house. Well, we didn't anyhow, because they always believed like that. The dead came back to visit.
So also was night, and you did visits. So you went to the Priory, or we used to Priory because it was the nearest to us, and you did an Our Father, Hail Mary, and a Glory for each person of your family that was predeceased you. And then you did around the town afterwards, look in the windows, because we all dressed up for Holy Thursday night. And then you went home, and you set the table for people that were dead belonging to you, and you let them out food, you let them play set, and you let them food, and you lit a candle, and you went to bed. And you presumed that they would come. Of course, that was there again in the morning, that was gone. but you did it automatically, year in, year out.
Isn't that lovely? So the first few from Mayo, they're from Tipperary. So again, if you go looking around the country, you'll find those kind of things. They're not the kind of things people come forward with because they're very private. And also as well, if you're talking about death, I kind of find, even when I was preparing stuff for you, you're leaving yourself a little bit vulnerable. If it's not. If I could talk about Halloween folklore all day long to you, but when you're talking about death and people, you're kind of treading with people's beliefs, and you have to handle it gently. Does that make sense to you? And it's not like this is not like storytelling where it's big performances. It's not that. You're kind of, it's much more rooted. It's rooted personally and deep inside people, what they believe. And when you start to, and I suppose I have a duty as well to be careful with that content and those people. Do you know what I mean as well, don't you? That's a duty within me. But one thing actually as well, when you're there, I won't even play this video because I realise I'll run out of time straight away. I was only looking at this last night, and this woman, a neighbour of mine, Bridget Buckley, she had a lovely one. She says that at the wake, the candles would never ever burn down. You probably know this yourselves. You'd always have to keep the candles lighting, and when they'd be going down low, you'd replenish them really quickly, and you'd keep the small candles, and then you'd give the small candles to the people who were at the wake, and then on All Souls Night, they would light them to remember who had passed belonged to them. She also spoke about this thing called the visits, which is a very, very Catholic tradition. Some of the older people might remember it, would you? Where you'd visit the church, you'd go in, you'd say a prayer, and you'd go back around again. I think that could have been the next step up from the more house private versions, if you know what I mean, don't you? I'd say the church could have kind of saw an opportunity there themselves to kind of bring it more into the church rather than keeping it very, very private. That's just me talking. That's what I could see. This woman remembered doing it one night and nearly burning the house down because she said they put the candles in the dresser. But here's two traveller women for you that I recorded a couple of years ago. The woman on the right is Bridget, is a Wicklow woman. But they talked about remembering the dead as well. And what's lovely, it's really, really gorgeous. We were always rare to run travelling people at home in Wexford, is that they spoke about being inside in the tents and in the little bell tents and how they had this exact same connection with the dead coming back. The dead would find them no matter where they were on the side of a road somewhere and lighting the candle. So I'll let you have a listen to the women here, right?
What did you do in All Souls Night?
They said mass when anyone was gone before, the lads went to mass. I used to mass there. Lit candles, obviously Mommy went up to light candles, she liked
My dad used to buy candles,
Yeah.
no big long candles. I think it was only tuppence or something for a big long candle. And maybe get 6 or 7 of them. And Mommy was very careful for, like, a lot of children have been more down since that, but she used to have an old bucket, and she filled it with sand, and she light all the candles. That's for my mammy, and that's for my daddy, Lord Mersham, and that's for such a fella died with such a thing last week. And they all every one candles.
On All Souls Night.
And also, and they'd be in the front of the tent, you'd be in the tent, but they'd be stay as far as that thing away. And you'd see them all lighting, all the candles lighting, and it was really pitch dark, electric lights around it.
Yeah.
And we were piecing them, and then candles would burn the next morning down into the sand. Those sand letters, and they'd burn down into the sand. Or you'd stick them in a padette, like a hole in the padette. And you'd stick candles down the padette, like padettes around the edge of your fur. And they'd candles all around it. And they'd all burn out.
Pray then before you go to bed, and pray when you get up in the morning.
I won't play anymore. You'll find this stuff online. You'll find a lot of that stuff online. But isn't it lovely? There's a few things to bear in mind there. What the women said, to come and visit them in the tent, the candles in the circle. The potato. Here's one thing, you see so much dodgy stuff around Halloween in the last couple of years, lads. I can't believe, my blood pressure goes up. But one of the things that a lot of people would have done, country people in Blick, I'm sure the townies would have done it as well. A spud or a turnip were actually a great candle holder. Not only were they a great candle holder, they were a great safety device, because as soon as the candle burnt down into the wet of the spud or the wet of the turnip, it put itself out, right? And that's one of the things I see with the turnip. The turnip was a very practical thing. There's loads of stories with jack-o'-lantern and all this kind of floating around these days. I wouldn't put too much to it, but I think it was a very, very practical thing. And even at Christmas time, I'd come across people who would have used turnips as their holder for their candle on the Christmas table, maybe covered with a bit of paper, a bit of holly around it, right? So these vegetables are very practical. Bucket of sand was another great one. That's what we used because we were beside the sea. But one of the things I'm going to end with, I won't let you listen to it because we'll be conscious of time. One of the women in that particular clip, and always struck with me. She said she was homeless, one of those traveller women, and her husband had passed away, and I asked her, did she light a candle that for him, and she says no, because said he won't be able to find me this year, Mick. Said next year hopefully now I'll have a house and I'll light a candle and he'll know where I am. But just at the minute she was going through a transition and she didn't know, she felt that he wouldn't find her, right? So that's the start of all this November material. Halloween, All Souls, All Saints, there's layers of practices there, lads. There's no right and wrong. There's layers of Christianity, there's pre-Christian practices there. They're all the layers that make us. I'm a great believer in the layers that make us. There's no right and wrong. We borrow from each other. I'll let you listen to this man here, man from Newfoundland, where loads of people, I go out spend a bit of time in Newfoundland, Wexford, Waterford, South Kilkenny, Tipperary, bit of Cork, bit of Carlow, all went out, hung on to the Wexford, Waterford, Kilkenny accents the same way. They went out the late 1700s, earlier as well, went rural. So when I go over there, it's just like a carbon copy of what we did here, and just kind of amplified a little bit more. But listen, this man has since passed away. Jerry O'Keefe is his name.
Did you ever see your mother and them doing it on All Souls night? Did they believe that the dead came back that night? Do you have that story?
Yeah, I remember the man said that don't go out tonight, this is All Souls night. When you say to her why, she said, honey, the souls may be around. So we were so young, we didn't even know what a soul was.
And I'll stop it there. There's hours of record with that man, but they had the same thing. So what we did here, they just did it and carried it on to believe that the dead came back and the souls were back. He had the same thing about throwing out water as well for the All Souls that night. One of the things I suppose we do as well, and I suppose because I'm talking about death, the tone is different, and sometimes in other talks I would do, I don't know whether any of you do it yourselves. Do any of you visit the graves on All Souls night or Halloween night and light candles? I do it now because my parents have passed away and my grandmother passed away, and I would call out and I'd see it, and we'll touch on graves and funeral traditions in a while. They're just my own parents' grave, our grandmother's grave. But I just noticed, I took this snap one evening in Escarty, and it was just a grave, and there's traveller graves there, and there's people from all over the town, and probably villages from outside it as well. But the whole place was lit up. And I know anyone here, maybe from Poland or maybe from Portugal or Spain, Poland in particular, they go visit the graves as well. So a lot of our traditions that we think are purely Irish, I keep telling people, they're all cross-European traditions and cross-global in some ways. Some things that we just do that are instinctive in humans that we do. And that's one thing I always keep telling, the things that we think that are Irish, they're not. When you tease it back, and we're in a great place now to look at what the similarities are. And I'm a great believer in there's more to connect people than divide people, and working on that principle, and you can go anywhere. But those graves, the idea of remembering the dead with light is a really, really important thing. But one thing, I don't know whether you played this as children, we played with the children at home. We didn't play it as children growing up, but older people around Wexford did, and Dublin did, and they played it in England as well years ago, but it survived, died in England, survived here. Death was always around us. Right, and even when we had Halloween just passed there a while ago, this game, I don't know whether any of you know this game, the plate game or the saucer game. Right, basically you get, I'll just show you a sketch. There's a sketch of it from England, from this, 1830, right? And here it is from Carlow from about 3 years ago. So basically you get, older people remember playing it. So you get 3 or 4, 5 plates, sometimes 7 plates, and you put different objects on them, you blindfold a child, spin them around, and then they have to put their hand in, and whichever what they put their hand in, that's going to predict their future. That was on Halloween night. It was a game. And basically, death was there. Clay was there, like you wouldn't get away with it now. You know, we do. Children love it for the crack. The idea of being put their hand in death, you're going to die. A ring, you're going to get married. A stick meant you were going to get hardship. Water was always in it, which meant it was emigration. So water was always part of that narrative of our history. Always there within our games, the idea of water and emigrating. But death was there, and it was just there. I suppose death was a bit more close to people back then than it is now, with infant mortality rates and younger people dying. We're living longer than we ever would have had, right? So there's that game called the plate game. Have a look at it for Halloween. But like even the simple things of a barn brack, which I'm sure you remember, barn brack, there's loads of different names of it. A load of people would have played the game with a pea, a stick, different objects to symbolise your future coming into the year. Now you wouldn't put clay in it, but you would symbolise what was going to happen to you. And obviously when it went commercial, marriage was the ultimate thing we all wanted to get at. So the threw rings into it. Actually as well, when I go to Newfoundland, I came across, they don't have barn brack, but they put all those same tokens in their pancakes on Shrove Tuesday, the ring and stuff. And then when I come back to Wexford or Kildare, I'm sniffing around, and sure I'm finding people who did the same as well. So again, I remember recording a man, he said, "Oh, we all did that, Mick." And I was going, "Oh, you didn't." You know, that kind of way, he believes that he did it, and he believed the rest of Wexford did it. But the exact same thing about predicting your future. Here's a strange one about predicting your future, and this is from Galway. This is a real photograph from a man called Sooty Lochnan, isn't it? Lochnan? He sent it to me. Little Christmas, we always call it Little Christmas, the 6th of January. And on Little Christmas, the eve of Little Christmas, you would get, this is done in, I came across it awfully, and it's still being practiced in parts of East Galway, right? I think in Connemara to do it a bit as well. So basically, it never took off, and you can understand why now when I explain, right? So on the eve of Little Christmas, on the 6th, you would light these candles for everyone in the house. So Mick's candle, Tom's candle, John's candle, Mary's candle, right? And they're all the same little tapered candles. And basically, you'd light them, and in silence then you'd wait, and whichever, hoping to whatever you believe in, that your candle wouldn't hit the bottom, because when your candle went down to the bottom and went out, it meant you were going to die that year, right? So this fella said, we sit around that, but we still do that with the chaps at home for the crack, right? And so people do it, and they're going, oh Jesus, don't. And there's still, I guarantee you, there's still families who still do that game, right? Never took off for obvious reasons in the rest of the country. And it was done up, recording to people and awfully doing it as well. So that's a game that we didn't take off as much. Here's one thing I want to talk about as well. So you can talk about, I'm just talking about Halloween and some of the kind of things we did during the year to predict death and fate. One of the things, I suppose, come here, we're naturally superstitious, I find, right? When you wave at magpies and spit at magpies and step over cracks and don't split poles and all that crack, it's in us, right? And I think once the story gets into that little head of ours, it just keeps going round and round, and it's in us, right? But one of the common stories is about the robin. Have anyone's heard that story? Yeah. Anyone's heard the robin? Like, Mammy at home always had a story about the robin coming into the house. If someone was going to die, if a robin came into the house, there was going to be a death. Now, some people said a robin brought news, but the kind of general narrative was, by and large, I'd say 70% of the people said, oh, there's going to be a death, the older people, right? And that's what they believed. Now, there's a connection with birds and death, which I'll tease out later, but I'll let you listen to a couple of people talk about it. And these are old recordings from different parts of the country, Wexford and Tipperary in particular, and Clare.
Oh, my mother would have said about a robin to know that we could know.
Aye.
If a robin come into the house, she'd lose her life.
It was a bad sign.
Bad sign, yeah. She had an awful fear robin.
Aye.
No one about, you might not know about.
Yeah.
Oh, we're going to have a death now. That's
Yeah, you see,
something would have happened.
Yeah, it was from the
A
devil.
robin came in.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if she hopped around the table and started.
Yeah.
Yeah. She had an honest God now, that's what she was pretty good for robin.
I don't like to go inside. I do not. Nor tipping on the window. No, well, I wouldn't mind tipping on the window, but if a bird comes in, it's some sign of a death or something, not so much even maybe a death, but something is going to happen, like, you know.
Yeah, but my grandmother used to look after the robin, and she'd never come back after she died. She used to feed her breakfast. She used to stand on her breakfast tray in the mornings and eat off her breakfast tray. And but she died. She was bedridden at the time, and she died, and the robin never come in anymore.
And they say it's lucky to see a robin to come in. It must be lucky for a robin to fly into your house or kitchen. But they bring some news.
The robin, came in like to be bad news, supposed to be. Or a picture falling off the wall. Didn't.
It's not all that long ago. I had a cousin visiting me, and the next thing was the robin came in. Well, the others came looking for a bit of food. I never took any notice of it. But she said, oh, well, she says, someone of us is going to die. And not too long after the poor woman herself died. She died. Well, she was good age. She was in her 80s. But I always thought of that. But still, I wouldn't believe that the poor robin would be the cause of anyone's death.
We were in school together, and my friend is epileptic fits, God rest her soul. And she'd never take him till the robin landed on the sanctuary lamp. And she died. He used to always turn around to kind of sing his little tune, and he came in this morning, he never whistled or anything. We knew she was gone. She went to one of them. Oh, I did, I know about the robin. Or if a robin comes in and was back out, that's a sure sign of a death. If he flies into the house and he just comes in and goes back out.
or a lonely swan in a lake is a sure sign of death.
It's powerful stuff, isn't it? And whether you believe this or not, there's still you have so much respect for the people telling the story, and you're there with them and when they're telling you. And that's a really important thing as well. I find, like, I wasn't going to show you the end clip, but it's very powerful, isn't it? You know, and it's very personal as well. I remember when the morning my own mother died, lads, and I've told the story a few times before. She believed that Robin coming in. That's what she believed. But I remember it was 7 o'clock in the morning she died, and I met a cousin of mine at 11 o'clock in the sister's house, and she came in to me and she said, "Your mother came in to say goodbye to me this morning, Mick." And I said, "Will you go away or that?" I said, "She did." She said, she came in, hopped around, little Robin came in, hopped around the table, she says, and I said, I went over, I said, I put my hand out, and she came up with my finger, and I walked to the door, and I let it out the door, she says. And I said, "Go wait, will you, right?" And she says, "No, come here." I said, "I have a photograph of it." She took out her phone and showed me a photograph of it. And like, that was, come here, death is a strange one. Our reason is different. You know, kind of way we see things, we take comfort in things that, in different ways, you know, and anyone's experience it, you take comfort. You take, even like take anyone who's experienced it, even at a funeral, the comfort you take about seeing someone's face at a funeral or wake, the comfort you take out of holding someone's hand for that moment, that hard handshake, or that hold, or the long hold, or the hug. They're all really important things, and I think we do. I keep saying, I think we do death well in Ireland. I think we do it very, very well. But those things are there, and I'd hate to see us losing them, you know. But come here to me. I have a video clip actually before. This will tell you the dilemma I had. Granny was 103 when she died. Mammy was much younger. But Mammy believed it, but Granny didn't believe it. Now, I found this clip late last night, and I said, I'm going to show it to you, because Granny was actually she was after peeling an apple, and she had a knife in her hand, so the two of them were like chalk and cheese. So they're very funny.
The Robin Floyd is supposed to be a day.
Well, no,
The family.
good luck. See Robin flying in. No. My house is Robin's flying, used to fly in here.
I don't know, we've been Robin flying in the water man for weeks in the day.
Well, I only was coming outside before
2 hours after that, we were dead.
Yeah. And the Robin didn't give in.
And so we were Robin Floyd, a few, digging in the ditch out. A few dead before Catherine died, this Robin came back from the whole night. And Jenny went out to the back kitchen here when the Robin was in it. About 3 or 4 days after that, Catherine was dead. It is unlucky, I don't give a damn, they are
They're not unlucky. They're the luckiest thing to ever come into a house is the Robin, says Granny, right? So that's what I was dealing with, right? But anyway, speaking of birds, I can't show you. I'd have tons of stuff for recordings, but the story of this bird appearing in death is so common, right? And the idea of a little bird appearing at windows, and then when the person would die, the bird would never be seen again. You saw little clips of it there. But one of the classic things, if you went inside into Dublin, you'll see the Oliver Shepherd statue of Cuchulainn and the bird on his shoulder, the announcer of death. I think it's Bowie or Baud, or is her name. I don't know what the Celtic goddess name of her is, but I know in Wexford we call the Banshee the Bow, and the Banshee in Wexford was always seen as a bird. We call her the Bow, and she would always be like the stories we've had of neighbours who shot the Banshee, and when they go up there to find the Banshee, they'd find a small black bird. That's what they would find. So this idea of the bird crops up an awful lot in our folklore, and I suppose the Banshee is one of the biggest announcers of death. You've probably all heard stories about the Banshee, and I'm going to, for those of you who probably haven't, I'm going to let you listen to a few clips. I pulled a few clips together, but the classic story, you're probably warned as this thing growing up in Wicklow, I don't know where you're from, I've never picked a comb off a road. Did you hear that story as children? Yeah? The Banshee will come after you that night. And the classic story, she follows the O's and the Macs, and again, classic Anglo-Norman, Cambro-Norman, Wexford, I can rule that one out because I know Anglo-Norman families that the Banshee will follow in the same way as well, so I don't believe that narrative that it's always the Gaelic families either, right? So the old Anglo-Normans came after as well, and I'm sure some of the planter families that came after as well, and probably new families that came after as well. And I've even heard stories of the Banshee appearing to fellas on ships, on merchant ships in Argentina. So people, this idea that she's fixed, it's a figure in your head, but people have told me stories. One woman in Limerick told me that her grandfather apparently was on a ship in Argentina, and he swore he heard the Banshee that night, and then when he found out a couple of days later, a week later, that his father was dead back in Limerick at that time, right? So again, it's whatever we take from it. But I'll let you listen to a few clips of people talking about the Banshee as well.
The Banshee used to
Follow
death like that, you know. Supposed to be always. My sister now up next door, Fogarty's lived next door to her. And they always said the Banshee followed different families. Yes, you know, the Fogarty's, the Banshee. But, and they really believed it. Yeah. And the night before a person died, they heard the Banshee. Do you remember that telling us about, he was cycling up and down, and as he come by Crosstown Cemetery, yeah, something come across the road, straight across the road, and straight in the cemetery gate, through the wheels of the bike light, just darted out and through. And he jumped off the bike, but he didn't know what had happened. He said to stay up here, stood on his head like that. He came out to Castleridge, and when he got out, wasn't it his sister? It was only after that. Mick Neville's wife. Mick Neville's wife, yeah. By the time he got home to Castleridge, she was after died. And that had happened coming by Crosstown Cemetery.
I was told about your aunt, she followed the Fogartys. And Lucy said to me that night, you'll always know when Jim Fogarty is going to die. Because she said, Banshee follows the Fogartys. But Jim died and his wife died and his sisters died and they all died and I never heard of Banshee.
Mick Murphy, Barney Murphy's father, he was the only one, and he was a man, Mick Murphy was a man certainly not to tell any yarns, he wasn't a guy. But he heard it crying, I think it was his father was dying, or mother, I don't know. But he heard this crying in the field opposite, and he went out, and he looked, he said there wasn't nothing in the field, there was nothing, no growth on the ditch or anything, but the crying was there, and he could hear the crying, you know, but he couldn't see anything. He couldn't see anything. But whatever it was, Nick was telling the true story because he wouldn't, you know, he wasn't the type of a man to make up anything, you know.
I could show you these videos all day, lads. Those collections are lovely because the next person talks about finding the comb on the road. Another person then talks about what the Banshee looked like, right? And one of the classic stories crops up is a small woman, sometimes with a purple dress, long hair, flowing long hair, usually with a bridge in Wexford, and I came across it in Roscommon or Leitrim recently as well. Someone had it up. Bridges were common sites where the Banshee was seen. They said just use the river or the stream as a place to comb her hair. Now our Banshee folklore is very mixed up with our mermaid folklore, and I'll touch on that in a second, right? There's a load of crossover how it's come to be, right? But this little small figure, again, whether you believe it or not, and anyone who will disbelieve it will tell you that it was like a vixen in heat was one of the classic stories, or a cat caught in the snare was another one, or things like that. That was the crying that people would hear, and especially around this time of year in November, December, when the evenings were dark and they were cold, and you know, sound travel, especially in country areas, you would hear it. You know, you would hear those sounds. And again, it's up to you whether you believe this stuff or not. But they're the stories that people passed on. And one of the classic things that people said was all the banshees and fairies disappeared when the electric light came, because then we could see everything and they were gone. And I suppose that what really disappeared is really what they're saying is the telling of the stories disappeared, right? The telling of the public, you know, the house calling, that kind of social, you know, people bettering each other with yarns and trying to better the other neighbour with yarns. That left an awful lot of people. It's still there, but you have to go looking a little bit harder, right, for it, right? And that to me is real storytelling, real honest storytelling. He's all with me. Would someone give me a check of the time there, because I can't see the time. Is it
20 to 4?
Oh Jesus, lads, here's me doing an hour, which is a night and a half during it. We'll run okay about 10 minutes after, right? Here's another lovely recording. I'm here in the bow.
I went out to shoot the gate and I went to bed. And I could hear the bow roaring all across the hills. Come on past the small graveyard and stopped. And I come back into the hall when I said, you can't come over here to hear the bow. I surely won't, she said. So I bet Jan said I should stop and she come to the graveyard. And assured that they are, come to the graveyard, the screamer stopped. And said, there's somebody dead around. And Jim Burton about it half I died. And the bow always followed the Burtons. And that is the truth. Gospel told I heard of.
Like me, I put the hat on me. I said, I'm not going to hit this door anyway.
Yeah.
My mother often
Well,
saw,
can you hear, I heard I wanted you like,
my mother saw him
what
coming
which one
on
the
here,
stairs on that?
coming from what way is the moat? The moat used to call it.
But where you were going now, the nails out who, Eamon now, the man that you probably over there, he's 8 years later now. I was working, I worked there for 11.5 years, and his sister was dying. And we did look at it, there was a hell of a yard when you go, and the bow was roaring in the yard, the square was on archer. And he come in up the stairs, and he was in the bed, into the bed, Jones had the square and swept out.
The sister died.
The sister died. She died the next morning.
Yeah.
That's right.
Oh, you can tell stories forever.
You would.
Isn't it lovely, isn't it? To me, to look back at these, like, I obviously was there, but you forget stuff, you know, that kind of way, you just forget those little moments, those little gorgeous moments. Here was one thing, actually, when you mentioned about, one thing that crops up, this is a mermaid from Clonfert, I think is up in Galway. Classic, I think there's a mixture with our mermaid and banshee folklore. I know other people might disagree, but in Wexford they crop up, you hear people citing this banshee with a kind of fish's tail. And this imagery of her with a comb and a looking glass is always really, the mermaids were always seen with a big comb. That's found right across Europe, England, Scotland, Wales, France, down to Spain, right? This idea of a figure. And we go down to the Basque country a good bit. And down in the Basque country there's a place called Mundaka. We'd go to a good bit for carnival. And they have a figure called a lamiak. And Mundaka was settled was said it was an Irish settlement. And they said that kind of mermaid that figure was brought down there. It was a woman with long hair who would live by the river and who would use a comb to brush her hair. And every year these groups, could be hundreds of women now, basically dress up as this lamiak banshee figure and sing and dance through the streets. Incredible sight, lads. So there's a kind of a physical kind of street theatre version of a kind of a figure, like, and I'm sure the lamiak figure is related to the mermaid figure, and all the things about announcing death is so similar to our banshee figure, which we can't even touch on or tease out here, right? One thing about Ever as well, he's all okay, so he is. Yeah. And like if I run over, you can tell me if you need to go or anything like that, right? And run over. One thing which crops up an awful lot in the folklore in Wexford anyway is this term called a fetch. And I'd come across it in Newfoundland as well. And a fetch basically meant you'd use it, say, if you were walking down the main street of Bray and you saw someone, you could say, oh God, if a child looked like it's mammy or daddy, you'd say, oh God, it's a fetch here, right? I mean, looks the image here. But it was also used as as a sign of seeing someone who could be after dying. And you'd see someone's fetch, right? And that crops up an awful lot in the folklore at home and also the folklore over in Newfoundland. And again, I can't find it in other counties at all, but that same idea crops up in other counties, but not with that name, right? If that makes sense, right? And here was one thing that crops up an awful lot as well. And one of the women mentioned in the Banshee story was a light went through the bike and into the graveyard. Lights were always seen as well, and that's a common thing as well. Lights were seen, and there's one place at home called the Powell Light, but you would see lights where someone was going to die, right? Or coming into a graveyard or going out of a graveyard. A lot of it could be completely, you know, all these figures like Jack-o'-lantern and Will-o'-the-Wisp, they would have all developed out of those, that kind of folklore, those kind of figures. But people did see lights, and usually the crack in Ireland was, and in Newfoundland, was to go to a priest and say a prayer. And then sometimes you have to slip the priest a few pounds as well. So it worked out well if the priest was saying, anyone was saying a few lights, right? But that was called a fetch. And I'll let you listen to a little one clip of a man. And again, what this woman here is talking about, seeing a fetch, right? But here's this man here. I love this man's manner.
One of the things I didn't believe in was people coming back after death. And I happened to be going to the out farm one day, but around 12 o'clock in the day, and I saw this man in the yard, and I stopped and went into him. And when I was getting over the gate, he was gone. But I thought he was gone into his house. And I went to the house, a couple of the houses in the yard, and called his name, and he didn't appear. So I said to his daughter, it's very quiet. You know, the man was dead 6 or 8 months at the time. Now when I went out, the daughter was with me. When I went out on the road again, the daughter said to me, Daddy, where's the man gone that was sitting on the stone there, rubbing the dog? And that's the time I firmly believed that he was there. I thought I was seeing things, but because when she saw him, there must have been some truth in it, you know. So that's what happened.
He's a lovely manner, hasn't he? Lovely presence of him, and he kind of one of those men who'd be dismissive of that kind of content, but yeah, he'll share, he'll open himself up. Let's listen to another woman, Patricia Dowie. Hang on.
Do you ever, I know it's more supernatural kind of stuff, but do you ever hear things like someone could be dead, or someone would see affection?
Oh yes, oh my gosh, that was Canada. Like George's father, who was a very sensible man, very black and white. Now, he told us he was going down fishing 40, 50 years ago, and he met this fella on the kelp pack, they call it, the pack going down to where the boats were. And he said, found it so strange, he said, when they came home, they found it so strange that Paddy Conway didn't speak though, and he had died during the night. He says he met him that morning on the kelp pack going down where the boats were. And he was adamant, right? Now, my neighbour just up from me, I'd say about 20 years ago now died. She walked into the brook right in front of our house and drowned. But it was the year of moratorium. My husband used to walk up on the trail, which was between our house and their house. And this morning he was coming down, him and the dog, we had a Springer Spaniel, him and the dog, and all of a sudden the dog started growling. And George, he looked into the meadow, there was something between our house and their house, a meadow. And he see this figure sitting on the rock. I said, what? He said, I see a figure, a lady sitting on the rock. So he said he went to the fence. He said, now let's someone try and play a trick on me now. I'm going to find out who you are. So he said he went to the fence and he tried to go over. He said he was frightened a bit. Every hair on the back of his head stood up. But the dog, he says, what really frightened him because the dog refused to go into the meadow. He said, I literally grabbed him by the collar and he whined. He would not go in. Wouldn't go in. So George said, the heck with this, I'm going to find out now who you are. And he started walking towards her, and he said she stood up, she was back onto him, she stood up, and as he got all of a sudden one, she was there, next thing she was gone. To this day, he swears it was this lady that lived up in that house, right? Well, I know when he walked in that morning, he was ashen. His face, he said, I'm sure the first time I'll ever decide about
Great stuff as well, isn't it? Her accent's incredible too, isn't it? Absolutely, yeah. Kilbride, and then living down in St. Bride's. Hours of recording to that woman, right, as well. Here was one thing actually crops up an awful lot in folklore, is a horse will sense danger. They say dog will sense kind of something. That crops up an awful lot. So horses, you know, if anyone keeps horses, if you put anything strange, if a horse go up and down here all day long, but if you put a sweeping brush there, the next day the horse will stop. They'll see things, right? And remember one man up in Tipperary telling me years ago, he said that a horse would go along the stretch of road and it'd stop and it wouldn't go any further without you whispering into the horse's ear about a man who was killed there. And he'd say, Morrigan, Brian, I done no harm to you. And then the horse would carry on then. And then the horse would go on then, right? So that kind of, that same kind of folklore crops up the length and breadth of the country. One thing that I've been doing of late, actually, I've spent a lot of time over the years recording undertakers and funeral directors. I was in Clonmel with the Museum of Hidden History in Clonmel of late in September, recording funeral directors about different practices, you know. And it's really interesting. I think it's a really interesting thing to be doing because it's, you know, it comes to us all. And you know, you'll find unusual little quirks and different things that are in different parts of the country as well. One of the classic things, which a man called Jasper Murphy out in Feather told me, he says that Cromwell came into Feather, whenever it was, 1649, when was Cromwell? 1640s, yeah? So when Cromwell came into Feather anyway, I came in by this street called Barrack Street, and as a result of that, locals weren't happy. Something happened, or he fell off his horse, or there was a few different stories, but anyway, Cromwell is associated with that street, and to this day, whatever this man was telling me, funeral director was telling me, he said, there's no way anyone in Feather the hearse will go down that street, right? So basically, it's a beeline, it's a straight road, it makes sense to go down Barrack Street, but they'll go up a different street and down that street and down that street to get to the graveyard, right? There was one man apparently, and he was telling me that one man defied Cromwell, or defied all the locals, said, I'm going to fucking go down that street when he dies. So the hearse went down that street, he says. He said, I'm not going to tell that. I said, the words he said, I'm not going to let that bastard tell me what to do when I die, right? So he went down with the hearse and went down that street. Now, I was also told, your man said to me that his house was in tatters, so he didn't want the hearse going back around and all the neighbours seeing the state of his own house. So he went down that way for a quick shot, right? Here was the tradition. So the kind of ghost stuff is there. That's really strong within our tradition in Ireland, right? But on a more very obvious, practical practice thing, traditions, I pulled out a few different things to highlight to you of different death practices around the country. Is that okay with you? And I'm sure you will see. Here was one thing, and I hope it survives still in Bray. Like I know on the Maid Street of Gorey, and I think it's the funeral. If a funeral was going on Gorey, even the big shops will stop. Close the doors or close the windows. They'll go out of their way to turn off the lights, right? And I think it's a lovely thing in this day and age to see a town, a functioning, working town, to be able to carry on to do that. And not to, if you to give those few minutes for someone who's passed away to the family, what it means to that family is so important. So I love seeing that. I don't know whether it goes on in Bray. I know things have changed, whatever. I know I heard it in Cork and then heard it in Tipperary as well. You're supposed to, if a funeral was going down by you, you're supposed to take 3 steps with it. I came across that in Cork. So basically you take 3 steps with the cortege and then you will carry on with the rest of your day, just to show that little bit of respect. But one of the things in Wexford, and it was done on the east coast and south coast of Wexford, and it survives on the south coast, if you're ever down near Kilmore, is that when a funeral would go by a certain, where there used to be an old whitethorn or a skeoch tree, the family would, or the undertaker will do it now, will leave a little piece of wood. Traditionally, it was made from the coffin of the coffin of the dead person, but a little cross, and it's stacked into the ditch, held up with sheep wire here, as you can see. And that was practiced in different spots all over the coast of Wexford. I came across it practiced in Cong in County Mayo, was the only place I came across. Here's sketches from it from Wexford, and here's a great sketch as well from 10 Acre from the National Library. It was Mrs. Stokes' image, Elizabeth Stokes, and it's a skeoch or a whitethorn tree with little crosses hanging on it. The whitethorn is a very, very important tree in our folklore, and very important, I'd say probably pre-Christian, but also very in Christian folklore, and even right today with our May bushes. So it's a lovely sketch of putting the little crosses in it. Down in Galicia, this is another one, a sketch from Carrick-on-Banno in South Wexford as well. Down in Galicia in northwestern Spain, they have the same thing again, and usually you would find that cross custom at the crossroads closest to the graveyard. And now what happens is no one graveyards have changed, there's a new graveyard. The old graveyards would have become redundant, but still they would carry on stopping at what was the crossroads closest to it. Does that make sense to you? And I know in Galicia they have that, they say that the dead or the souls congregate at the crossroads closest to the graveyard, right? So you start to see little patterns cropping up. Here was one thing when I mentioned skeochs to you. This is up in Skahana in Galway. I took this a couple of years ago when I was working up there, and you probably heard this. This is a sad part of our history. Every village in Ireland has little burial grounds for infants that were buried. They weren't allowed into consecrated ground due to the rules of the church at the time. Or sometimes buried in graveyards in the dead of night, buried in fairy forts, or sometimes buried in just quiet little spots and corners, fields. And one of the things you will come across an awful lot was people will plant a little whitethorn and a stone just to mark those spots. This place is called Skahana up in East Galway. And you'll see little stones and trees. This is the most gorgeous tree. I don't know whether it was planted by bird droppings or whether someone planted it there and there's someone underneath it belonged to them. But there's 2 whitethorns weaved and twisted around each other and grown up. And the thing is, that's not that long ago. Whitethorn only lived till about 150 years, maybe pushing to 200. So that's like that practice carried on until the 60s. I know in Wexford anyway, for sure, and every part of the country knows that as well. Here's another thing with regards to the fairies. We land our folklore on certain things to cover up or to protect spaces. The classic one is our fairy forts. We've got 40,000 of them, give or take, or raheens, we call them, or ring forts, whatever you want to call them. But I know in some parts of the country they were used also for infant burials, and I know that people wouldn't touch them for loads of reasons, but one was the fairies. But I also think as well people knew that there could have been people belonged to them buried there as well, and that's why they were never touched as well. And you could talk for hours on that, but definitely I know some were buried. I know of one case in Tipperary where the mother and the child was buried in the ring fort, in the fairy fort. So the woman and the child was buried in it. Here's a lone whitethorn tree out near me in Wexford, and it's got a stone underneath it here, and no one would dare touch it. And that's the kind of classic fairy folklore tree that you'd never touch. And here's the only one I know of in this part of the country. This is in Castledermot graveyard in County Kildare, and it's a whitethorn. I was only up at it recently, shaped into the shape of a cross. It's incredible to get the layers of that. And I'll just touch on this story. I won't show it to you. Is this man here brought me down to see it. There was a spalpeen from Munster, Waterford man, came over to work in South Wexford. I'd say 1940s. And the man said he was found, usually the travelling men were found dead in barns. You know, the kind of way the poor old craters would go work for a farmer, they'd move on, they'd work for another farmer. But he was found dead in a hay barn. And he said he wanted to be buried in this graveyard, and he asked the locals to put a whitethorn at his head and a stone at his feet. It crops up in the song Buried in Kilkenny as well, that symbolism. And he put it up, And I think someone the local BP anyway took bother to it anyway and didn't like it and cut it down. And said it wouldn't have that kind of pagan symbol in the graveyard. That was the story they heard. So the locals then got together and put a plaque up for the man. Larry Egan was the man's name. But that idea of the skiock being a kind of a, it's a powerful little tree. How are we doing for time, folks? Tell me, eh? How are you doing for time? Is more so. Keep going, right? So we'll keep going then. Where am I at all then? I won't run. Oh, here's one. So there are loads of things. The whitethorn it crops up. It crops up even. Do you know what it crops up in? There's 1798 folklore in Wexford. You will come across. There's a man up and buried in Clonegall. He was wounded in the Battle of Arklow. He ended up dying, and there was a whitethorn planted on where he was buried, and it fell over in 1930s, and then they put up a permanent stone there. So they were living that long. So a lot of our folklore around whitethorns and fairies and brackets they're marking sites that where people were buried, either children or someone was buried. One thing that will crop up as well is, you'll come across it here. You'll come across in the West in particular, where the poor craters got a slap during the potato blight, was the hungry grass. Again, where they said different theories. One theory is, if you go, there's a thing called the hungry grass. If you go into a field or go into an area, you will get pangs of hunger, right? And you say you'll get, just hunger will just hit you. And usually they said it was when someone was being carried and the coffin may have been left down when they were going to be buried, and that spot where the body touched the ground was where basically if you walked on that, you would get the same kind of feeling, or the same things will come over you that killed that person. That's one of the stories. You get the stray sod in fields, things that people getting lost in fields as well. But that's definitely, I've heard, related to where the coffins were left down. Do you ever notice why coffins wouldn't be left on the ground? Do you ever see that? I found in Wexford they try not to be always be raised up. You'll even see them in walls sometimes, in little spots in walls where the coffin would be carried over a wall, but the coffin would not be left down on the ground. They tried their best not anyway, in the circumstances that they had, to try to keep it off the ground. But I'm going to touch on kind of a general kind of practices here in the next kind of run of the slides. I'm going to let you listen to this woman first here, a woman called Bridget Buckley. And this interview is about an hour long, but I'm going to show you maybe 2 minutes, right?
All the mirrors in the house would be covered with a white cloth. Like, there would be no mirror left uncovered, and the clocks would be all stopped. The curtains would be drawn on the windows. There would be no curtains left. All curtains off to the house would be drawn. And when a person would pass away in the house, a window would be opened to let the spirit go free. That was traditions in years ago, that was happening. Yeah.
And people wore black for the year, didn't
they? People wore, the women of the family wore black, and the men wore black ties and a black diamond sword onto their coat, onto the sleeve of their coats, and they wore that for a full year. And there'd be no radios or televisions during too many minutes time anyway, but there wouldn't be any radios or televisions turned on in any house in the locality while the wake and funeral would be going on, but in the house itself, like, they give it maybe a month of mourning before they put on any music or entertainment. And they would go to no social occasion. If it was a parent or a brother or sister, they wouldn't go to any dance or anything for a full year after a person passed away. Yeah, they would be whole year before they called it.
And you were saying as well, years ago, you'd be dropped off to a dance, but
yeah, I remember, like, my mother saying that my father would drop her, they were going out together, he would drop her to the dance, but wouldn't go in, and then he'd be there to pick her up to bring her home, but he wouldn't go in and dance because of his mother had passed away. Yeah.
And he couldn't go to dance for a full year?
No, not for a full year after death. And when like, there was such a thing as a high mass, and like, there'd be all the priests in the church all chanting there for the high mass. That's gone away completely now. There's no such thing. I remember that too, and I just vaguely remember that.
Did you ever hear the thing, high money, high mass?
I didn't like to say it, but that's exactly what I was thinking.
No money, no mass.
No, yes, exactly, that's what I was thinking, yeah.
That was bad too, no?
That was. Which is, everyone was as near to God as the other.
Isn't she lovely? Everyone as near to God as the other, and I'll explain what she was on about. This is a cant we heard. High money, high mass, low money, low mass, no money, no mass. This idea that everyone was treated equal, far from it, lads. The poor man wouldn't have a priest at his funeral. And if someone had at home, this is Wexford now I'm talking, someone locally might have a few words of Latin, and there was a prayer called De Profundis. And someone could be called. I remember a woman said her father had to deprefundus. He was a postman, and he'd be called to go bury. So basically, you're lucky if the priest blessed a handful of soil, and then you would stand and you throw it onto the grave. I remember talking to Church of Ireland neighbours, and they said we could never understand that. Said among you, said we'd treat everyone, well-offers, middling or big farmer, everyone would be treated equal. But said there was a big divide there, and it changed. And only changed when people started to go to, when the funeral homes started to come in, and when people would be brought to the church. That changed. I could see that an undertaker near me at home in Wexford was telling me, he said they had a little room in the church where the body would be brought from the house and then be brought there and spend the night there before being buried. And he said that was a great leveller. Poor man, middleman, well-off man or woman could all be treated that bit equally. And that was a little cant we heard. I don't know whether it went on in other counties, but certainly with us it did. Here was another leveller, the bag of cement. And you have these Americans coming around and everyone else, and not picking out Americans, anyone coming back to find their ancestors, and they're looking for big fine cut stones, and fair dues to you if your family did have big fine cut stones. But a lot of poor people didn't have big fine cut stones. And all people would have had was a wooden cross or maybe a stone to mark where their dead was. And when the bag of cement came along in the 1930s and 40s and 50s and 60s, we start to see people make their own headstones, permanent headstones. And if you go to any graves, I remember asking a traveller woman this, said to me, said, we had no graves years ago, Mick, she said. And she said, and I said, why the big headstones now? She said, well, she said to me, it's the only piece of ground we'll ever own, is one of the things she says to me. But to them, it's so important to remember their dead and to have an opportunity now to be able to remember their dead. And anyone who's kind of, I find sometimes people criticising and cribbing about the scale of the graves and the headstones. I say, what about Newgrange? What about the pyramids? What about those places? That's what we, humans have always tried to remember their dead, whatever way it was. And that's what we've been doing. So there was a great headstone my own father made for the man and woman that reared my mother. And you would have seen the stone beside it. So if you were the American coming back, kicking grass, looking for or dock leaves, looking for where you were buried, you had no way of figuring out who those people were. So it was so important to have something permanent there to record it. Other things you'll see, I love graveyards. Give me a graveyard any day of the week. I wouldn't be caught dead in a shopping centre. Give me a graveyard any day of the week, lads, right? Old axles of old carts, old blacksmiths would make stuff. Just gorgeous, handy. Look around next time we go to a graveyard. It's lovely seeing all the lovely cut stone ones, which are absolutely gorgeous. Cullens and burns are amazing artwork on the headstones. But also look for the homemade ones, the people who had nothing, who made markers to remember their dead. These are great little ones at home in Wexford, little granite crosses. The travelling stonemasons would come around and spend a week or two in a village and make crosses for the people, 1700s, early 1800s, and then leave these little stone crosses. There's one area of Wexford is full of these little crosses, gorgeous. Now, before I came on here, I got messages from people. And this came from a woman called Ellen McDonough, traveller woman up in Navan. She saw I was coming up here, so said, I'm going to tell you things we don't do. So I said, feck it, I'm going to show you, right? So she said to me, they never stand at the foot of the bed of the dying person. You'll block the safe transition of the person's soul into the kingdom of heaven. At 12 at midnight, say the rosary to grant speedy passage of the dead person from their mortal world into the next world. Cover all mirrors or anything that shows a reflection, such as a television screen with a white cloth. Never stand on the grave of a dead person. I'm sure you've heard that before. Always place photos and keepsakes of the family relatives who have passed away before in the deceased person's coffin to bring them to the family members already in heaven. Some of these things are so contemporary. And I would know as well, you'd see people, even I guarantee you might have yourselves, you might have memory cards in your own cars, do you? If you see, especially with the people in the travelling community, their vans, there's one man who was telling me, he said, I don't know how the grandfather, he doesn't know what speed he's going at. He said, because the whole thing is covered in pictures of all his dead relatives, right? He just don't know what, doesn't know whether he's got petrol or oil or water. You just can't see a fucking thing because there's so many oaks covered up, right? And home wakes always leave the front and back door open to allow the passage of the dead departed souls. And candles must always be lit. And that was texted me this morning, right? Just to show you. And I'm guaranteeing you'd probably show me stuff as well. One of the women actually, this was done in Wicklow in Dublin, done in Leinster in particular, done in England as well, by the way. A lot of our traditions would have been just crossed over and survived here a little bit longer. Here was one thing. One of you ever remember any of your relatives talking about these? You'd always wear a black diamond on your left arm of your coat. The undertakers would give them to you. And usually sometimes to be kept then, you'd wear them for the year. If you look back at old photographs, you'll see some people, men wearing the black diamonds, so they would know that someone was dead belonged to them. And very, very common. I came across it in Cork, not as common in the West, but definitely common in Leinster and Munster. And you hear little sayings I've kind of penciled in for you as well. You ever heard this saying? 3 in the graveyard. One opens it, one fills it, and one closes. Have you ever heard that? People die in trees. That's a kind of common kind of belief. And that's a cross-cultural kind of belief that people will have. Another one I'm coming across an awful lot, I came across with the undertakers as well. They say when at the time when the poor, we've all been at wakes, folks, and when the lid is closed and the moment you're there with your loved one is that they close down the lid, and you know then that it's final. You know that kind of, that's a moment that it's final. But some people have a habit now of going in, just giving it one little turn, with the chance that, I suppose, maybe to believe that it just gives them a little, it's not forever, that kind of way. There's a little bit of hope there. You just turn them slightly, a little bit of a turn. Undertakers will tell me to see that an awful lot going on now. Maybe you've done it yourselves. One thing as well, I came across a man telling me this years ago, a man called Mo Curtis, and I came across it only, I think it was left there for the dog to drink or something like that, but I was at a funeral there recently, and it was just a saucepan of water left at the gate of a graveyard. But this man had it that he said that whoever would be in the graveyard would always have to, his family would have to come back and leave him or her a little bowl of water so that they would have it, they'd never be thirsty. And then when that person would, when the next person would die, their family would do the same, they would come. And one classic one you'll find all over Ireland is the last person guards the gates. Have you heard that? You Donegal, you get it here as well. You get it coming down to Wexford as well. So the last person that would die would be on the gates, they said. So they would be basically their body or their soul, their ghost would be at the gates until the next person came. Now there's a man up in Donegal wrote a play about it, and it's lovely. And he said basically they'd closed the graveyard, so this poor crater was stuck on the gates like a bouncer until all eternity. Other kind of things that crop up, just little things that would crop up. Again, very strong within the travelling community. Also, I've come across, people's non-travelling community people as well, is pregnant women in the graveyard. Have any of you ever heard that? That said you wouldn't bring a pregnant woman into a graveyard, or a pregnant woman not to see a corpse. That was another common one. They said you wouldn't do that. Again, some of you might go, this is absolute rubbish, I was pregnant at the time, but these are just things that I would have heard, right, from different people, right? Here's one I heard only recently as well. It was bad luck to buy something new for a funeral. Someone was telling me, did you ever hear that? And I'd never heard of it. Just people will tell you, and it's funny then you'll hear it. And here's the gas thing about folklore. Once you hear a story like that, guarantee you'll be going home going, I heard it from such and such that. You with me? So just it spreads in its own little viral little way. One of the things which I mentioned earlier on, and I still love it, is the idea of stopping for a funeral. It's just stop. Like life can stop for a funeral. And I'd see it even, I've done it myself, if you're ever driving, I don't know whether you do yourselves, a funeral will be coming towards you, stop the engine, just stop, right? And you could have people behind you going nuts, the story survives with the Mayo football team, that piece of folklore about that. But you'd wait until the last person would pass in the cortege, and then you'd start the engine and you go on, right? And Bridget Buckley was telling me this one about her husband, and I've come across this in Wexford an awful lot, is farming men, when someone would die locally. Have a listen.
No, like in the locality here, if there was anybody, if any of the neighbours or anybody around her died, there'd be no work done on the land, absolutely. Now, even Sean, like he wouldn't drive by the church with the tractor, which was a funeral going on inside or in the graveyard. He'd go maybe 2 miles on his way to miss the church if he wasn't at the funeral, if he was going down. He wouldn't drive by a house or by the church if there was a funeral going on.
Do you hear that? Yeah. And that's a kind of common one as well. I've come across harvests being lost. I'll be 5 more minutes with you, but harvest is being lost. Men would not just, if they had the weather to cut and there was someone dead, they'd say, no, listen, that's it, leave the machinery up. Then when the person is buried, then we'll go at it, and that's what we do. So I'd hate to see us losing it, right? I'll just finish up here now very quickly. Here was one thing. Visiting the graves on the 9th day, South Wexford, very particular. And I came across it in Central America, right? It's mad. It could have been some kind of Catholic priest or missionary or someone brought it somewhere, but that survived there. You'd visit the grave on the 9th day. These women, these traveller girls, I won't play it for you, they'll always say to me when they visit the graves, they'll always beep the horn when they're leaving. So basically they're leaving the graveyard, and it's like, the way you be beeping the horn with someone's house going by, the 3 beeps, and tit. They'll always do that, saying goodbye to them, right? Someone when you're going by. Here's a lovely one from a singer in Wexford. A man called Matt Murphy told me this. He said some singers, when you'd be asking singers, traditional singers, my wife is a traditional singer, they'd have a stock of songs, but then you could ask them for one song and they'd be always slow singing it for you. But then they'd sing it maybe just on special occasions. But that one song they'd always keep in the repertoire. They'd say that everyone has a special song that will open the gates of heaven. This one song that they will just keep until but they believe will get them into the gates of heaven. I'll briefly touch on wakes with you. But it's just an account a man texted me this morning. If we want to read it ourselves. And it's just lovely. Like, we could do 5,000 of these recordings right now today if we wanted to. If we wanted it, we could get these kind of recordings because they're in their memories. This is an older man called Paddy Jeffries, left Wexford, lived in England. When a person at home died, it used to be that a blessed candle would be lighted in their hand to light the way to heaven. The rosary said and the holy water shaken over the body. After that, the local women would wash and lay the person out. Sometimes the men would help. The wake would then start. People in and out of the house paying their respects. The proper wake would start that evening. The room would be crowded, not at all solemn. The men would leave the room at 12 and the women would say the rosary. After that, the women would bring some food and drink and everyone would be in good mood. The wake would continue up until the next evening when neighbours coming and going. That evening, the coffin would be brought to the church in preparation for burial on the third day. I suppose it was a sort of a ritual. And that's an 85-year-old man texting me that on his phone this morning. And I'm guaranteed there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people out there who could write their accounts from their part of the country just like that right now, still if we wanted to. So the wake was important. The idea of taking the body out, the home wakes are becoming more and more popular. The funeral home changed that. The undertaker changed that, where people can go in and get everything catered for, and you can understand it too. There's been a shift back a little bit. From talking to undertakers, the home wakes have become more popular again. They're putting an awful lot of pressure on families too, to be fair, but that's what they do. One of the biggest things when you come across the country was when people would say when such and so died, you couldn't get the coffin in, and you're not supposed to get the body and turn the body up like that to take it out of the house. Now I'm sure some people have to do it these days, but in older houses, I always heard stories of windows being taken out. You probably heard them yourselves, of windows and doors and trying to get coffins out of houses when people would had passed away. But I was in Newfoundland, and this man called Dermot Power, he'd swear he was from Waterford, and he showed me, I was photographing his dresser one day, and he showed me these marks on the door. And he said, oh, them. I said, they're the marks. I said, of my father's coffin. He said, we couldn't get him out the door, and we had to get him out the window. They had big coffins over there. The same kind of thing, but to get a photograph of that was incredible. Like, to get a photograph of that thing was just incredible. So that's Dermot Power. I'll end up very, very shortly. One of the things which I came across, it's funny when you're in this line of work, you'll come across a story and then you come back to Ireland and you'll find it, Jesus, that was hiding up in Leitrim somewhere, but I didn't know about it. You know, that kind of way, right? But when I was over in Newfoundland, this woman, again, herself told me the story. I'll let you listen to her for a second.
And you were telling me a while ago that, you know, when someone passed away, the clocks would be stopped.
Yeah, the blinds were closed, and for example, I can give you a case of in Potlands. My father went down to a funeral. Not being from out this area, didn't know what to expect, but anyway, he went down to the funeral, and just as they were bringing in the corpse, they turned every chair, it was a chair, so it wasn't pews, they turned every chair bottom up, so the devil couldn't come in with the corpse. There was no room for it. And then as you came in, you turned up your chairs, you sat down. But the someone said there was no, any chairs that were empty were not turned back up. So there was nowhere for them to sit.
And was that for the devil or was it for the spirit of the dead person?
No, it was for the devil, keep the devil out. Right? It's like my mother told me. An older lady in Branch, when she was growing up, told her never, when she found out she was going in nursing, never sit by yourself. Never leave a priest by themselves when a person is dying, because as sure as God is there, so is the devil. Never leave a priest alone in a room when someone is dying without someone else with her. Like she told us that. Oh, she was, and she said it was more than her had been told that kind of a story. Never leave a priest alone by themselves, right?
No. You could all read into that in your own ways, couldn't you? Could be no lease being slipped over there, or the deeds or something. But I came across it in Leitrim as well, the idea. They said that when they lifted the coffin up, they wouldn't leave the seats there. They'd literally violently kick the chairs over, so they'd be just turned over. One thing as well which cropped up as well, I came across it in Northwest Wexford and North Kerry, over in West Kerry, was that, say when someone would die, say it could be a young man, and the mother would get his friend or someone belonged to him, close to him, to wear his clothes that Sunday, the following Sunday to Mass, or to wear his Sunday, or maybe wear him around the house. Other people said as well that if someone passed away, there's some, years ago, people, not even now we've got 500 pairs of shoes, and some people have it, I don't have it, but you know yourself, we've got an abundance of everything, but someone would pass away, you'd be given to be snigger, no, someone's always got the clothes, to be passed on. Say if someone had a nice set of clothes, to be passed on to who might be helping out with the wake, or might be helping out with something such and so and so. But this one in Wexford and one in Kerry was the idea of wearing the dead person's clothes was there. Now, I'm going to end with this actually. I suppose, come here to me. It won't be long. Just preparing this chat with you, I suppose I'm just kind of going through stuff. I said to you, it's not comprehensive, but it's to give you a flavour of some of the things, and maybe it's just to, if you're interested in this idea of yourselves, come along to the workshop tomorrow, if that's no hassle at all. But if not, just take it away from this, Stephen, to record and just to listen to the stories that go on around you, because time moves on quickly and the things that we do are really important. I think we do dead good in Ireland. I think this idea of, we saw funerals like Shane McGowan's funeral, and poor old John Kenny as well, that passed away today from the Unbelievables. There's something. I think we keep, as I said to you, and no more to it. I think we keep our dead close. I do anyway. You're dead. They never leave you. And that's something we've carried on, and that's something that kind of goes forward. And with that, then, by remember the dead, you remember the stories, and you remember the practice, and you remember loads of different things. And I suppose to keep it's a light load to carry. And I suppose, if you go, one of the things that I like going to now is going to we call them Pattern Sundays, going to the Mass. It's lovely to see communities come together to look at the graves on that Pattern Sunday, or even on a Christmas Eve, if we're coming to that time of year now as well, is that going to the graves on Christmas, and going on Christmas Eve, and seeing all, guaranteed, just to witness it, seeing all the holly wreaths, and seeing all the candles, and seeing the people making the visits there. I go out to see my own mother and father's grave on Christmas Eve, and it's the chance. I don't live in the village where I grew up anymore, but it's the greatest chance to meet people. You see more people now than I would, at any other time. So it's a lovely chance to do it. And I think wakes are incredible too. You know this yourselves, and I'll end with this: is they're great crack. The kind of way you go to a wake, there's more laughter and messing. I'm sure if someone came in and goes, "What? There's a dead person here," and you're all laughing and messing. And so we do that part of it well, I think, And I think they're just there's always great chat. You don't know what kind of chat you're going to hear at a wake, which is always an interesting thing again, and meeting those people. And on that note, I'm going to stop talking because I'm going well over my time. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you if you have any questions or anything you want to contribute, throw them up here, and before you hit the road at all. So I'm ending me app. So you can throw something at me if you have anything you want to throw at me. That's fine. Nothing at all. No. Good. Now, typical Wexford man, we'd either be selling buds or strawberries. We're out of season, right, for there, right? But if I've got a couple of books. There's one of the Folklore of Wexford. You can't get it. There's about 3 copies left in Bridge Books in Wicklow Town. That's the only place you'll get it, right? But there's a book on the May bush in Wexford which deals with that burial customs and the skioks. And there's also a thing that I do every year. So my last year doing it, it's a lovely little project called Dresser and Folklore Calendar. So it's photographs of old dressers, but there's loads of folklore dates throughout them. They're €10 each. They're normally 15. They're 10 today because I'm here with you. It's easier to do it and process them online. So if you want to get them, feel free. If you don't want to get them, there's no hassle in the wide earthly world. And come here, thanks a million to lads here, Aoife and stuff, for inviting me to be part of here, and thanks to the tech team for kind of setting me up to where I was treated so well coming in here and looked after. So thanks a million, and enjoy the rest of the Yarn Festival as well. There's loads of events on, so be on your way, and thanks again. Thanks.